Hey guys, tonight we float up through misty olive-scented air where the Acropolis isn't yet crowned with marble, but with argument. There's a storm forming above the limestone cliffs, but not the kind with thunder. The kind with gods, with egos, with immortal bickering so intense it could probably melt a temple column. You're standing between two titanic forces, both ready to fight over a piece of land that hasn't even built its first theater yet. And spoiler alert, one of them is going to invent a tree that changes the course of history. The other, well, let's just say he brings splashy vibes. And you probably won't survive this unless you're really into eternal feuds, sacred topsoil, and unsolicited divine landscaping tips. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can all see who's drifting off under which stars tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stroll through early Attica. No colonnades yet. Just hills, wild herbs, and goats that definitely do not respect your personal space. The city doesn't exist, but the land is promising. Sea breezes roll over sun-scorched rock. Somewhere down the slope a fishing boat creaks. And high above, higher than mortals should look, Poseidon and Athena stare each other down. Mainstream historical fact. Athens is said to be named after the goddess Athena, following a legendary contest with Poseidon for patronage of the city. This story appears in various forms in ancient Greek sources and art. Fringe tidbit. Some versions of the myth claim Poseidon didn't just offer water, but a powerful warhorse, which feels very on-brand for a god with ocean rage and equine energy. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects real political struggles between seafaring and agricultural values in early Athenian culture. But right now, it's just the wind, and two gods hovering above a flat plateau waiting to decide the fate of a future metropolis over a gift. Because apparently property law in ancient Greece involved supernatural show and tells. You step closer as Zeus appears not in thunder, but in that way that makes the air smell vaguely like static and honey. He raises one celestial eyebrow and says something like, "Let the contest begin." You nod. Not because anyone can see you, just because it feels polite. And the earth beneath your feet hums like something ancient is about to grow. You find a half-cracked boulder to lean against, trying not to look directly at any glowing divinities. Eye contact with gods tends to end badly in these stories. Zeus has barely finished the last syllable of his declaration before Poseidon stomps forward, all beard and bravado. He doesn't do subtle. There's no quiet offering, no soft persuasion. Poseidon does what Poseidon always does. He slams his trident into the bedrock of Attica like he's trying to crack open the earth itself and yell into the underworld. Watch this. The rock splits with a dramatic hiss, like steam escaping an ancient kettle. Salt water surges from the ground in a sparkling fountain spraying mist into the hot air. You can taste the brine just standing nearby. Mainstream historical fact. The myth says Poseidon struck the ground with his trident and created a saltwater spring called the Erechtheus or Erechtheion, a sacred site on the Acropolis. Some ancient travelers claimed the sound of waves could still be heard from it. Fringe tidbit. One version insists he actually summoned a full warhorse instead, glistening and battle-ready to symbolize naval power and martial might. Because nothing says civic infrastructure like horse thunder. Historians still argue whether this tale was meant to favor sea power or mock it. Some think it reflects Athens' maritime ambitions. Others see it as a warning about impulsive promises with splashy beginnings and soggy endings. You wipe salt from your eyes. Poseidon's gift, while impressive, leaves something to be desired, namely fresh water. A few citizens gather to inspect the offering. One dips a wooden ladle into the pool, tastes it, and immediately grimaces like someone just served them anchovy tea. You stifle a laugh. Or try to. Another person nudges the edge of the spring with their sandal and mutters, "Does this come with plumbing?" Poseidon glares. It's the kind of glare that could summon a tidal wave out of spite. You take a generous step backward. Meanwhile, the salt water trickles into little rivulets seeping down the slope and carving shallow grooves in the ground, none of which look particularly useful for farming washing or anything but mood setting. To Poseidon's credit, the spring is dramatic, majestic, full of raw power. But that's kind of the problem. It's the mythological equivalent of gifting someone a fog machine for their wedding registry. Athens doesn't need drama, it needs stability. And as the sun creeps higher, the fountain glitters like it's trying to distract everyone from how wildly impractical it is. Poseidon folds his arms. He's said what he had to say loudly and with salt. Now it's her turn. You feel a shift in the air. A breeze so soft it barely lifts the edge of your robe, but it changes something. The sunlight doesn't get brighter, it just feels cleaner, quieter. Athena steps forward, calm and barefooted. No theatrics, just an owl perched on her shoulder and the glint of strategy behind her gaze. You can almost hear the mortals whisper, "What's she going to do?" She kneels, places her fingertips gently on the dry soil beside Poseidon's bubbling salt pit. And she waits. You lean in, half expecting another divine explosion, or at least a dramatic incantation. But she doesn't shout. She plants a tiny seed. That's it. Just a seed. A few heartbeats pass, and then, right before your eyes, something begins to grow. The seed cracks with a sound softer than a sigh, but you feel it more than hear it, a tremble beneath the dust as roots slither down and a stem coils upward hungrily. Leaves unfurl in a spiral of silvery green, their undersides catching the morning light like polished velvet. You've seen trees before, sure, but never one that seems to choose its shape this delicately. It's not just sprouting, it's crafting itself. Athena doesn't move. The olive tree grows until it's shoulder height, then taller. Branches stretch like arms in a morning yawn. Tiny buds appear, then blossoms, then fruit. All in seconds. Olives green and unripe but perfect dot the branches like punctuation in a divine sentence. Mainstream historical fact. The olive tree was central to Greek life. It provided oil for food, light medicine, and rituals. Athena's gift is often interpreted as a symbol of wisdom and peace. Two things Greek city-states notoriously needed more of. Fringe tidbit. Ancient olive oil wasn't just for salad. It was used in wrestling matches to make athletes slippery and shiny, which sounds more like a TikTok challenge than sports prep. Historians still argue whether the olive tree in this myth reflects a specific agricultural innovation or just mythological backfilling to explain why Athens loved olives so much. Either way, the effect is immediate. The crowd leans in curious. One brave soul plucks an olive and sniffs it. Another picks a leaf and rubs it between their fingers, nodding thoughtfully, as if pretending to understand photosynthesis. Then someone shouts, "Oil," and suddenly the whole grove buzzes with interest. Because this tree isn't just beautiful, it's useful. Unlike Poseidon's saltwater spring, which is still bubbling gloomily behind you, this offering is practical, gentle, renewable. It doesn't demand, it gives. A woman nearby mumbles something about how it could press oil for lamps. Another envisions cooking with it. Someone else wonders if it might work as skincare because even in ancient Greece, moisturized is civilized. You smirk. Olive oil as early beauty serum, trendy and eternal. Athena still hasn't said a word. She simply steps back and lets the tree speak for her. There's a kind of reverence in the silence that follows, not because people are awestruck, but because they're thinking. That's Athena's move. She doesn't dazzle, she sinks in. You glance over at Poseidon. He's trying not to look bothered, but the sea mist around his shoulders starts to frizz like divine static. His jaw clenches. His saltwater spring now feels like the ancient equivalent of a second-hand blender, no returns, no receipts. The decision hasn't been made yet, but it sort of has. You can feel it in the way people linger around the olive tree, not the fountain. One kid even climbs into its branches and announces he's founding a new branch of government. Classic. Still, Zeus hasn't said anything. Rules are rules. The judgment must be spoken aloud. And that job falls to the most inconvenient kind of judge imaginable one, who is only technically mortal but insists on dressing like a lizard. King Cyclops, the man with a human upper half and a snake-like lower body. You blink twice, because yes, the early kings of Athens were rumored to be part serpent. Don't question it too hard, it's Greece. He slithers into view, crowned, slightly crooked, arms folded and eyes narrowed at both offerings. The crowd falls quiet again. Even the goats hush. He gazes at Poseidon's shimmering spring, gives a polite nod, then turns to Athena's tree, reaches out to touch the trunk, and smiles. The kind of smile that tells you this city's name is about to lean leafy. You watch as King Cecrops, half-man, half-snake, full-time city-namer, clears his throat. A hush falls over the crowd, thick and expectant. Somewhere in the back, someone drops a basket of figs and nobody even turns around. Cecrops lifts one hand palm toward the saltwater spring. Then, almost apologetically, he shifts and lays the other hand gently on the olive tree's trunk. His voice is soft but carries, "This tree shall stand for our people. Let our city bear her name." And just like that, the city becomes Athens. Poseidon mutters something into his beard. A wave crashes somewhere in the far distance, probably in petty protest. You wouldn't be surprised if a dolphin sulked off. Mainstream historical fact. Athens was named after Athena because of this mythical contest, a story embedded into the city's identity. Even today, an olive tree stands near the Erechtheion on the Acropolis, commemorating her legendary gift. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient sources say Poseidon cursed the city in retaliation by making it dry, prone to drought, or simply by making the locals slightly too proud of their philosophy degrees. Historians still argue whether this myth was a way of legitimizing Athenian democratic ideals. Athena's wisdom over Poseidon's force, or just clever PR to brand the city as chill and enlightened. Meanwhile, the citizens erupt in celebration. You duck just in time to avoid being whacked by a laurel branch as a teenage boy waves it like a sword, shouting, "All hail the Olive Queen." Someone tosses a handful of olive pits like confetti, and you immediately step away before this becomes ancient Greece's first recorded eye injury. The tree is now sacred. Priests and priestesses begin murmuring blessings, circling it with garlands, and humming low rhythmic hymns that sound suspiciously like a lullaby sung by very tired bees. Athena gives a half smile. The kind of smile that says, "I win, but also I told you so." You try not to look directly at her again. Divine humility is often just smugness with better lighting. Poseidon, still stewing, disappears in a salty cloud, but not before sending a passive-aggressive ripple through the sacred pool. You hear someone mutter, "Guess we'll keep it for dramatic fountain noise." The day continues, slowly, like sun-melted honey over bread. The tree's shade becomes the new gathering point. Philosophers sit cross-legged beneath its branches and argue about whether reality exists or whether the olive is a metaphor. Children chase each other around the trunk. Someone paints a picture of Athena with olive leaves braided into her helmet. You sit down on a smooth rock, eyelids heavier now. There's something comforting about watching a city decide what matters. Not war, not salt, not horses or rage or clashing tides, but peace and oil and shade from one small seed. Even as your thoughts start to drift, you hear the echoes of the verdict ripple into the world. Ships sailing out from Piraeus with amphorae of oil. Poets composing odes to olives. Philosophers debating the metaphysics of branches. And all of it from this contest, this myth, this moment, where the goddess planted something instead of breaking it. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a joke forms. If Athena and Poseidon were Tinder matches, one would ghost you, the other would grow you a garden. You let that sink in as a breeze rustles the branches above your head. The sun has mellowed into a honey-colored blur behind temple columns, and the scent of crushed olives lingers in the air, earthy, slightly bitter, but oddly calming. You stretch out under the growing shadow of Athena's sacred tree, and it feels less like a plant now, more like architecture. Like a soft-roofed monument stitched together by light and time. It's a good time to nap. But the city around you isn't done being dramatic. You're woken not by thunder or war horns, but by paperwork, or the ancient version of it. Scrolls, tablets. A very enthusiastic man is shouting about quotas and storage pots. Because now that Athens belongs to Athena, someone has to organize the olive oil. Mainstream historical fact. In classical Athens, olive oil was so central to the economy that its trade and storage were state-regulated. There were officials tasked with overseeing oil production, export purity, and even olive tree protection. Cutting one down illegally could be punishable by exile or death. Fringe tidbit. Olive oil wasn't just a staple, it was currency. Athletes at the Panathenaic Games received amphorae of oil as prizes, basically winning a year's salary in slippery liquid form. Ancient PayPal, if you will. Historians still argue whether the olive tree myth emerged before Athens built its economy around olives, or whether the myth was made up after to justify their obsession with all things slick and green. You wander through an open-air courtyard where amphorae, those elegant long-necked clay jars, line the walls like disciplined soldiers. Some are marked with an owl, Athena's sacred bird, and others bear inscriptions you can't read but feel weirdly judged by. One merchant is arguing with a scribe about whether an amphora should be counted as premium grade if a goat fell in during pressing. You choose not to get involved. In another corner, a small girl is pouring olive oil over her doll's hair, declaring it a divine shampoo. The adults don't even stop her. That's how common this miracle liquid is. Then there's the temples. You climb stone steps, quiet now, past flickering oil lamps that smell like lavender and ash, each one lit with olive oil burning slow and steady. Some of the flames are always kept alive, tended by priestesses who see fire not as danger but as memory. You overhear one priest whisper to another that the oil used in Athena's shrine must come from that tree, the original, the sacred, the one that sprouted in the contest. It's pressed carefully with rituals that involve singing, silence, and the occasional goat bribe. The tree itself, they say, can't die. Even if it's burned, it regrows. Even if it's cut, it sprouts anew. Kind of like Athens. You walk back down toward the agora where people now sip diluted wine from cups perfumed with a drop of olive oil, less for flavor, more to show off. Fashionable men grease their curls before strolling through the marketplace like oily peacocks. And older women bless olive branches before placing them under newborns' pillows, even the gods. Especially the ones who lost the contest seem to begrudgingly admire how one little plant has taken over nearly every part of mortal life. You pause at a food stall, where a man offers you something called elai oladon somo, basically bread soaked in oil, with a few salty olives on top. You nod. It's weirdly perfect. Sitting there chewing thoughtfully, you realize this isn't just about a tree anymore. It's about a city choosing growth over power, calm over chaos, and flavor over saltwater fountains. Which, if you think about it, is kind of profound. Or maybe the olive oil is just making you sentimental. Either way, you wipe your fingers on your tunic and lean back, watching the sky melt into the Aegean. The branches above you sway gently, and you start to drift again. You wake to the sound of bees. Not the angry chase you through the market kind. These are calm, efficient bees, aristocratic bees. They buzz with a sense of purpose like tiny bureaucrats in striped vests. They're working the olive blossoms. You tilt your head and catch a glint of sunlight filtered through the branches, dappling everything in pale green and soft gold. The petals all look like little white stars. For a moment, you wonder if Athena's crown might have been woven from these. Nearby, two philosophers argue in that slow, exaggerated way only men who have too much time can argue. The taller one insists that bees are nature's accountants. The shorter one counters that bees are just flying olives, and that's why they love the tree so much. You step away before they drag you into a debate about metaphor. Mainstream historical fact. Olive trees in ancient Greece weren't just agricultural assets. They were considered sacred, especially the original ones believed to descend from Athena's gift. Some estates boasted trees that were hundreds of years old and damaging, or moving them required government approval. Fringe tidbit. There was even a specific class of inspectors called eleophylax whose sole job was to patrol and monitor sacred olive trees. Kind of like tree detectives, or arboreal hall monitors. Historians still argue whether these inspectors were actually effective or just a convenient way to give aristocrats something ceremonial to do, besides drink watered wine and pretend to write poetry. You wander through a grove just outside the city, your sandals brushing over dusty roots and pebbles. Each tree feels watchful, not in a creepy way, more like they've seen too much to be impressed by your presence. A farmer greets you and offers a handful of olives freshly brined. You pretend to enjoy them because that's polite. They're aggressively tangy, like biting into a salted question mark. The farmer tells you stories in a warm, half-sung voice, how the trees remember droughts, how they can survive fire, how one tree in the Acropolis grew back after the Persians burned it down. You ask how long the trees live. He smiles. Longer than most kings. You believe him. Deeper into the grove, you find something odd. A tiny stone circle half covered in moss surrounding a stump. Beside it lies a rusted amphora split clean in half like someone had pressed it too hard into history. A boy runs past you barefoot and shouting about a snake with two tails. You choose not to follow. Instead, you sit beside the old stump, letting the shade fall across your legs like a soft wool blanket. You imagine the roots beneath you tangled and thick, curling around ancient bones, and broken pottery holding on to every story ever whispered under their leaves. The wind picks up. The branches rustle overhead, and for a moment you swear they're whispering in a language only olives understand. You lean back watching dappled light shift and blink across your eyes. You think of Athena again, of how she didn't shout or roar to win the city. She just planted something, let it grow, let it prove itself. And now it feeds the people, oils the lamps, anoints the gods, and perfumes the skin of philosophers who definitely overthink personal hygiene. A gentle bee lands on your knee and pauses as if to ask whether you've learned the lesson yet. You smile and it flies away. You shuffle downhill, past rows of olive trees now casting long, sleepy shadows on the cracked soil. Everything smells of dust and sun-warmed leaves with just a hint of that herbal sharpness you now recognize as the olive tree's quiet breath. At the edge of the grove, you arrive at what looks like a sleepy little shrine, though it might also be a tax office. Honestly, in Athens, the line between holy and bureaucratic is blurrier than a philosopher's love life. Inside, clay tablets line the walls in organized stacks, each etched with tiny meticulous marks you cannot decipher. Two scribes mutter about quotas, weight discrepancies, and something called the temple exception. Their wax-coated fingers move faster than their mouths. You're not sure if they're doing math or casting spells. Mainstream historical fact. The olive economy of Athens was so rigorously monitored that officials kept records of harvest sizes, export logs, and civic usage. Olive oil for temples and public ceremonies was tracked separately from commercial stores. Fringe tidbit. Ancient shipping containers. Those lovely amphorae were sometimes tampered with by adding water or heating oil to reduce viscosity, tricking buyers. Olive fraud wasn't just real, it was rampant enough to inspire entire policies around purity and quality. Historians still argue whether these early olive regulations were truly enforced or simply decorative guidelines like putting a "don't touch" sign on a statue everyone's already touched. You exit the stone building with a mild headache and a deep appreciation for modern spreadsheets. Outside, a merchant is shouting about a rare blend of oil aged under moonlight and pressed by orphans who sang in Dorian mode. He winks at you. You wink back. It's unclear if anyone is actually buying anything. You keep walking. The agora unfolds around you like a theater set in slow motion. Market stalls draped in linen flutter like lazy sails. Somewhere a goat sneezes. A group of teenage boys race past carrying a half-eaten honey cake and a broken flute. But what draws your attention are the olive-based oddities. There's soap carved into the shape of Athena's helmet. There's perfume claiming to make you as wise and warlike as the goddess herself. One particularly hopeful man sells scrolls titled 1001 uses for olive oil, including as potion-based door squeak remedy and marital negotiation tool. You stop at a food cart and accept a shallow dish of stewed lentils glistening with green gold swirls. It tastes like comfort, peppered with thyme and softened with oil aged in buried clay pots allegedly. The vendor explains that in some wealthier homes, olive oil was stored in cool underground chambers to preserve its aroma. He calls it liquid pride. You look around. There are children playing with olive pits like dice, young men greasing their arms before mock wrestling, and old women pouring oil onto stone steps before rubbing it in with their palms, a prayer, a memory, or maybe just habit. Olive oil isn't just food here. It's furniture, polish, lamp fuel, hair conditioner, perfume base, and ritual lubricant. It's medicine metaphor and offering. You watch as one man dips a finger in oil and draws a circle around his wine cup before drinking. His friend rolls his eyes but imitates the gesture. It's cultural muscle memory. A soft clanging draws your gaze upward. A priest stands on a small platform near the temple steps, ringing a bell with one hand and holding a shallow bowl of oil in the other. Tonight, he says, is the vigil of the oil lamp, when Athena's eternal flame is tended, and offerings are poured from the sacred tree's freshest press. You follow the trickle of people heading that way, all holding small flasks or sprigs of olive branch. And as the twilight deepens and soft lamplight flickers into being, you wonder, how did a goddess win a city with something as quiet as a tree? And how did that tree become everything? You drift with the crowd toward the temple, feeling like a single olive among many, gently jostled, slightly marinated, and uncertain how long you'll remain whole. The Acropolis looms above, cut into the sky like a marble bookmark, holding the place where the gods last paused their story. Even from below, the columns of the Parthenon shimmer gold in the lamplight, as if Athena herself has taken up night shift as a lighting technician. You trail behind a family carrying a clay jar wrapped in linen. The youngest boy keeps whispering that the jar is sweating. His older sister says it's because the oil knows it's going home. You smile mostly because you're too tired to correct him. Mainstream historical fact. The Panathenaic Festival, one of the grandest celebrations in ancient Athens, included a torch race where runners carried lit lamps fueled by olive oil to honor Athena. The prize for winners, amphorae filled not with coins, but with sacred oil from Athena's olive grove. Fringe tidbit. Some athletes reportedly used the oil not only for anointing but for drinking, believing it gave them divine strength. Others just liked the idea of being shiny when throwing spears. Historians still argue whether the sacred oil was chemically different or just ceremonially blessed. There's no record of divine filtration systems, but some swear the oil from Athena's trees had a sweeter scent and thicker glow. As you approach the temple stairs, the crowd thins to a reverent hush. Soft sandals shuffle over worn stone. You pass a brazier emitting curls of myrrh-scented smoke and step beneath an archway carved with olive branches and owls. The air changes. It thickens not with smoke but with stillness. That strange, sacred kind of silence that presses gently against your chest like a linen blanket. Inside, a priestess anoints a statue's feet with oil so clear it might be tears. She whispers something into the marble's ear, too low to hear, too important to question. You glance up at Athena's stone face. Her gaze doesn't meet yours, but it doesn't miss you either. Her helmet gleams with reflected firelight, and her shield leans against her side like a sleeping thought. You step aside and take a seat on a worn bench beside an old man already dozing. His head leans back, his mouth slightly open, but his hand still cradles a small flask. A young initiate carries a wide silver dish from torch to torch, pouring tiny spoonfuls of oil to keep the flames alive. Each light flickers like a heartbeat, steady golden and absolutely uninterested in your modern distractions. You reach into your own pouch and feel a pit. Not the emotional kind. A literal olive pit. Smooth, familiar. You don't remember when you picked it up, maybe from the grove, maybe from the stew. You leave it on the step beside you, a tiny, slightly wrinkled offering to the goddess of strategy, reason, and extremely practical fruit. Outside bells begin to toll in a slow, uneven rhythm like someone learning how to sigh in bronze. The festival is reaching its soft crescendo. As people begin to filter back down the hill, their torches bob like sleepy fireflies. You remain seated, legs numb, eyes, soft thoughts, buttery. Because here in this temple lit by patience and pressed leaves, it feels like time isn't marching forward. It's dripping, golden, one drop at a time. You eventually stand stretching legs that crack like old amphorae and groan like lazy oxen. The temple steps are cool beneath your feet, kissed by centuries of sandals and solemnity. As you make your way back toward the city, your thoughts are coated in olive oil, smooth, slow, slightly fragrant. The streets now glow with low fires and echo with clinks, murmurs, and the occasional off-key flute. You follow the scent of roasting barley and something vaguely herbal drifting toward a quieter quarter of town. There, you find a small workshop with a painted sign, Melanthios the Presser. Beneath it, an owl perches on a branch, eyeing you with suspicious wisdom. You nod at it as though that will help. Inside, the place is warm, filled with the hum of stone grinding against stone and the faint splatter of oil dripping into clay basins. A burly man in a tunic nods in greeting without looking up. He's too busy manhandling sacks of olives and turning a crank that controls a large wooden beam press. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Athenians used massive stone and wood presses to crush olives, separating the oil from pulp and pits. Some presses used large screw mechanisms, while others relied on counterweights and brute force usually applied by unpaid cousins or irritable apprentices. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient oil makers claimed that playing music while pressing olives improved the flavor. Others simply argued less if they were singing. Historians still argue whether the earliest presses were Greek innovations or borrowed from older Minoan or Levantine designs. The oil flowed the same, but the bragging rights, those mattered. You crouch by a wide clay bowl and watch as fresh oil trickles in. It's thick and golden green, catching the flicker of lamplight as it pools in lazy spirals. You're told this is the first press extra virgin blessed by gods and only mildly cursed by aching backs. Melanthios offers you a taste on a crust of bread. It's peppery and grassy, like biting into a spring thunderstorm. He grins and winks, clearly used to the reaction. A young apprentice carries a jug toward the back room where amphorae are sealed with wax and stamped with small clay tokens. Some tokens have Athena's owl. Others bear stylized olive branches. Each mark you learn identifies the press and ensures accountability, or at least plausible deniability. You ask about olive oil theft. He shrugs. Only fools steal from the gods, which is oddly specific and deeply unhelpful. Outside the workshop, you spot a woman painting olive trees onto a ceramic plate. Her brushstrokes are careful, meditative. A nearby pot bears a scene of Athena herself, standing proud as a tree burst from the earth beneath her spear. This is how the myth lives on, not just in words, but in pottery and packaging and everyday rituals disguised as chores. You wander further and find a bathhouse glowing from within, its steam curling lazily out into the night. Inside, men and women oil their arms before stepping into warm pools, smoothing olive oil into their skin like a benediction. You decline the invitation to join, mostly because you're already emotionally marinated. Instead, you follow the alley toward a little side street and pause by a shrine tucked between two homes. A single flame flickers behind a glass pane. A tiny dish of oil sits before it, unmoved, untouched. A mother and daughter kneel in front of it. The girl whispers a wish. The mother places a sprig of olive branch into the dish. No one speaks, no one rushes. The city sleeps on a foundation of stone, story, and oil. You keep walking, every step leaving behind a soft, oily echo that fades into the hum of a culture where fruit became faith. You turn a corner and find yourself face to face with a goat. Not just any goat. This one wears a ribbon tied between its horns and a vaguely smug expression that suggests it's won something. Maybe a pageant, maybe just an argument. Behind it, a group of children giggle and chase one another around a low wall, tossing olive pits like confetti. You duck instinctively as one zips past your ear, earning a chorus of giggles. The goat doesn't flinch, probably used to this nonsense. You continue on ducking through the gates of a small courtyard shaded by surprise an enormous olive tree. Its roots crack through the pavement like veins of ancient memory, and its trunk is thick, with time gnarled, like a fist frozen mid-gesture. Mainstream historical fact. The Athenians believed the original olive tree gifted by Athena still stood on the Acropolis near the Erechtheion. Even when the Persians burned the city in 480 BCE, legend claims the tree sprouted again the very next day, a sign of divine favor, or perhaps stubborn botany. Fringe tidbit. Some older locals swore that olives from that tree could cure heartbreak, improve eyesight, and rather mysteriously predict rain. Though most agreed the last claim was just a clever way to water the tree. Historians still argue whether the current olive on the Acropolis is descended from the original or simply a symbolic replacement. But in this city, symbolism carries more weight than marble. You sit under the branches, the ground warm and faintly dusty. A sleepy breeze nudges leaves into whispery applause, and somewhere nearby someone strums a lyre off-key. It's oddly perfect. Next to you, a small offering bowl holds 3 olives, a pinch of salt, and a folded note weighted with a pebble. You're tempted to peek, but something holds you back. It feels like trespassing on a prayer. Instead, you look up at the tree's canopy. The leaves shimmer in silver-green waves, catching the lamplight in a way that feels choreographed. Not flashy, just deeply practiced. This is where old gods live, not in thunderclaps or dramatic statues, but in quiet endurance, in leaves that outlive seasons, in fruit that feeds, heals, and lights the night. You lean your head against the tree's bark and let your eyes close. For a moment, time ripples. You can almost see Athena herself, helmet, tilted eyes sharp, smirking slightly, as Poseidon sulks in a splashy corner. You remember the goat, the tree, the oil that carries light and memory through this city's veins. A drop lands on your shoulder, just due, or divine approval. You're not sure which is more humbling. From a nearby rooftop, an owl calls once. Soft, low, like a lullaby written in vowels only sleep understands. The sun has fully bowed out now, leaving only stars to blink drowsily over the city's tiled roofs and uneven alleyways. You rise slowly from beneath the olive tree, brushing specks of bark from your clothes and trying not to disturb the offering bowl still cradling its quiet, salty wish. You wander again, pulled not by direction but by scent, roasted figs, charcoal, and that ever-present whisper of crushed olives. Ahead, a soft drumbeat guides your feet. It leads you into a narrow square where a small circle of people has gathered around a flickering torch. At the center, a barefoot woman dances with a jug balanced atop her head, its contents sloshing gently with every measured step. Mainstream historical fact. Olive oil wasn't just for eating or lighting lamps. It played a central role in Greek religious ceremonies, athletic contests, and theater. Victors in the Panathenaic Games were awarded amphorae filled with a golden liquid, each painted with Athena's image. Fringe tidbit. Some old folk tales claimed that certain amphorae were cursed if opened improperly. The oil would spoil instantly, or worse, the amphora would wail like a scorned oracle. But it's hard to verify since most people avoided opening them at all. Historians still argue whether the famed Panathenaic amphorae were purely ceremonial or part of a structured trade system where sacred oil doubled as currency. Either way, they weren't just trophies, they were stories sealed in clay. The music shifts. The jug dancer tilts her head back, balancing that vessel with the kind of confidence you reserve for people who've never stubbed a toe in the dark. Around her, others clap gently, more rhythm than volume, more reverence than cheer. You catch sight of a child mimicking her movements at the edge of the crowd, clutching a wooden ladle like it's sacred. He stumbles. The jug on his head wobbles. The crowd gasps, but he grins, sticks the landing, throws both arms up like a miniature demigod. Everyone claps. You realize this square, these people, this little spill of song and slosh and soot, that's what Athena really won. Not just the vote from sea crops or the victory over Poseidon, but this. The echo of a culture rooted in what can be grown, shared, and passed between hands quietly, warmly like oil itself. You glance up and spot a familiar figure on a rooftop, the smug goat from earlier. Still ribboned. Still judging. You wink at it, just in case it's sacred too. The music fades. People disperse. Someone hands you a fig wrapped in a vine leaf warm from the fire. You bite into it and it's sticky, sweet, earthy, and unexpectedly nostalgic, as though you've always known this taste. Across the square, an elder leans against a stone wall and mutters, "She gave us olives. He gave us salt water." The gods don't always make it hard to choose. Then he burps loudly and wanders off, dignity intact. You laugh under your breath. The night settles again and the lamplight seems a little softer now. Like it knows the story is almost told, but not quite ready to sleep. You wander down a narrow slope where the air is cooler, thicker with moss and echoes. The path feels ancient, less paved and more remembered. Stone steps curve beneath your feet, carved long before you were born, or Athens was a name anyone said out loud. At the bottom lies a grove. Olive trees stretch in every direction, their trunks twisted like dancers frozen mid-spin. The moon filters down in soft dapples, catching on silvery leaves and making them shimmer like coins spilled across velvet. In the middle of the grove stands a low rectangular stone. No inscription, no flourish, just a quiet altar ringed with amphorae. Most are sealed. A few are cracked open, their insides dark and thick with aged oil. A scent like pepper and sun-warmed grass hangs over everything. Mainstream, historical fact. Olive oil, when properly stored, can last for years, sometimes even decades. The Greeks knew this and developed ceramic amphorae designed specifically to protect their precious oil from light and spoilage. Fringe. Tidbit. There's a whispered belief that one amphora buried in this grove holds oil pressed from the original olive tree, Athena's gift itself. Of course, no one's found it, or admitted they have. But sometimes kids dare each other to knock on the altar stone and listen for bubbling. Historians still argue whether this grove was once part of a real sacred precinct or simply mythologized over time. The boundaries between worship and storytelling blur so easily when gods leave souvenirs behind. You kneel beside one amphora and place your hand gently on its surface. It's smooth and cool despite the warmth of the night. You imagine the lives that touched it, farmers, priests, mothers, thieves, all anonymous, all essential. A soft breeze stirs the trees. The leaves whisper together, then hush. Even the insects seem to hold their breath. You realize you've stopped blinking. There's a sense here not of watching but of being remembered. As if the earth itself has logged your footsteps and stored your weight like another offering. Not just what you bring, but that you came at all. The altar glows faintly in the moonlight. You resist the urge to light a lamp. Some places aren't meant for brightness, just presence. You trace a finger along the rim of a broken amphora and catch a smear of oil. It's older than your memories, but somehow it smells like a summer afternoon you forgot to notice. A fox pads quietly between two trees. Its eyes catch the moon and vanish just as quickly. You breathe in, and for a moment the silence doesn't feel empty, it feels full. Like someone long gone is humming a song with no lyrics but all the right notes. You close your eyes. Let your shoulders drop. Let the myths keep watch. You leave the olive grove with soft steps like you're afraid to wake the trees. The path curls uphill now toward a crumbling theater carved into the hillside. No lights, no audience, just stone seats catching moonlight like forgotten coins. You wander down the worn steps, each one echoing a little more than it should, until you stand at the center of the ancient stage. Behind you, an olive tree leans over the upper wall, its silhouette like a curled hand cupped around this quiet space. You swear you hear it whisper, "Begin." Mainstream historical fact. The theater of Dionysus in Athens near the Acropolis is considered the birthplace of Western drama. Many of the great tragedies and comedies of the classical world were performed there, often during the same festivals that honored Athena. Fringe tidbit. Some storytellers insisted Athena herself once attended a performance disguised as a mortal weeping openly at a particularly moving monologue and leaving behind a single olive pit still warm. No one's found it, but that hasn't stopped certain eccentric archaeologists from chewing nervously on ancient amphora fragments just in case. Historians still argue whether theater began as a sacred rite or evolved from more informal village storytelling. But nearly all agree the olive tree and the mask were never far apart in the Greek imagination. You whisper something just to test the acoustics. The walls catch your words and toss them back rounder, deeper, older. You say thank you. It echoes. You try Athena. It returns softer as though the stone has grown shy. You lie down at center stage staring up at the stars. From this angle, the theater looks like a bowl held up to the sky offering whatever performances mortals can muster in exchange for one night of peaceful weather. You wonder what Athena would think of your performance here tonight. No monologue, no chorus. Just your quiet footsteps, your slow breaths, and your deliberate awe at a city that still remembers its gods. You imagine Poseidon somewhere off-stage muttering about rigged votes and the lack of surfboards in mythology. You smile, roll onto your side. The marble is surprisingly warm. Somewhere an owl hoots again, 2 notes this time slightly amused. The city waits, and you let it. You wake not quite from sleep but from stillness and rise from the center of the stage. The marble has etched itself faintly into your skin, a quiet reminder that even rest leaves a mark. You climb slowly, tracing the same curved steps trodden by thousands of sandals and dreams. At the top, the breeze greets you like an old joke you're happy to hear again. You walk until the stones grow smaller and the olive trees thinner until the city unfurls below like parchment under moonlight. And there it is, Athens. Her rooftops shimmer. Her temples glow softly, as though warmed by memory rather than flame. Somewhere beneath that mosaic of shadows and scent is the very first tree. Or what's left of it. Mainstream historical fact. The supposed site of Athena's original olive tree still stands beside the Erechtheion on the Acropolis. The current tree is a descendant gifted by Queen Sophia of Greece in the 20th century, but it grows where the myth says the goddess struck the earth with her spear. Fringe tidbit tour guides whisper that during windless nights you can still hear a rustling from that tree, though no leaves move. Some say it's the breath of Athena herself annoyed that the souvenir stands block the view. Historians still argue whether the olive tree of the Erechtheion was an ancient relic, a symbolic planting, or a political statement layered in botany. But few dispute the emotion tourists feel when standing before it, quiet awe tinged with the scent of sun-warmed wood. You approach the Acropolis, its steps smooth and moon-washed. A stray cat rubs against your leg, then trots ahead like a sleepy guide. You follow. At the Erechtheion, the caryatids keep watch. These stone maidens hold up the porch like it's no trouble at all, their eyes eternally unfocused somewhere between reverence and boredom. You stand beside them, unsure whether to bow or wave. Then you see it. Not tall, not grand, but gnarled and wise and utterly alive. The olive tree. Its trunk splits low like it's already begun telling a story. The leaves catch starlight and hold it softly like prayers with nowhere urgent to be. You walk to the base and kneel. The ground is dry but smells green. You run your fingers through the soil and feel how old it is, not in years, but in attention. You offer nothing, take nothing, just sit. Somewhere below the city breathes. Somewhere above an owl takes wing. And between them, here you simply are. You lean against the trunk. It's rougher than expected, but kind. The wind circles once, then stills. For a moment, the world doesn't turn. Or maybe it does and you're finally turning with it. You close your eyes and listen. Section 15. The bark is cool against your cheek, worn smooth in some places, rough in others. You stay like that for a while, half curled against the olive tree, like a child pretending not to sleep. Maybe this is sleep. Or maybe it's just a kind of remembering. The night is deep now, not dark, never truly dark in Athens, where marble and memory reflect even starlight, but deep. Like a well you're content to fall into. You tilt your head up and gaze through the olive branches. The leaves sway just enough to mimic a lullaby. No music, no words, just rhythm and rustle. A breeze hums past your ears carrying the faintest scent of crushed time and dust baked into legend. Mainstream historical fact. Olive trees can live for over 1,000 years. Some in the Mediterranean are believed to predate the Roman Empire, quietly growing through centuries of storms, empires, plagues, and poetry. Fringe tidbit. There's a folk story that if you whisper your wish to an olive tree and leave a curl of your hair in its roots, the tree will either grant it or grow twisted in protest depending on how annoying your wish is. Historians still argue whether the particular olive tree on the Acropolis is genetically linked to any actual ancient planting or merely symbolically replanted over generations. But that hasn't stopped thousands from visiting it, photographing it, and yes, leaving behind tiny offerings. Coins, stones, notes folded so tight you'd need tweezers and time to unfold them. You don't leave anything, but the tree seems fine with that. You rise slowly, joints quiet, limbs warm. The Acropolis behind you, Athens below, stars overhead. It's time. You descend the hill. Each step feels less like walking and more like floating, like the story has unspooled behind you and now gently pulls you toward its ending. You pass columns, still standing, shadows still waiting, and cats still suspicious of everything but moonlight. The street lamps down below flicker in their lazy electric way. Somewhere a dog barks once and then thinks better of it. You pass a shuttered bakery where the ghost of sesame still clings to the air. A balcony with laundry that hasn't moved in hours. A cracked urn on a stairwell filled with soil and exactly one yellow flower. Everything here stays up just a little longer, like the city herself can't quite bear to sleep. You reach your room, close the door, remove your shoes with the reverence of a priest unwrapping relics. And as you slide beneath the covers, your fingers still smell faintly of olive wood. Ancient, honest, a little bitter. You lie back, you exhale. And just before sleep catches you, you swear. You hear a whisper from far above the rooftops, from the slope of the Acropolis, from a certain crooked tree. Good night. Your breath deepens. Your limbs soften. Everything now slows, not because it must, but because you've earned it. The journey behind you, the myths settle gently into the folds of your thoughts, like warm linen draped across ancient stone. You picture the olive grove again, the one lit only by the hush of stars. The one that remembers names you've never heard and still makes room for yours anyway. In that grove, the air is always soft, the shadows always patient, and the wind never questions where you've been. It simply wraps around you and waits for your breathing to match its rhythm. Let that rhythm guide you now. In, out, in, out. With every breath, the city dims. Not disappears, just dims. The marble fades to silk. The columns stretch toward the horizon and dissolve into story. Even the gods sleep sometimes. Athena, weary from watching, finally rests one elbow against the curve of the Parthenon and lets her eyes close, if only for a while. You imagine her smiling, not victorious, just peaceful. And maybe tonight that's all the victory anyone needs. The owl circles once. The leaves fall still. And you drift gently into that olive-scented quiet where nothing chases, nothing presses, and nothing ever has to end.